The version of early history most people grew up with skips the scariest footnote. The footnote starts with two words that sound harmless and ends with a world so broken even the mountains felt it. The words are, "The Watchers." In one ancient book cherished by early Christians and preserved in the language of Ethiopia, a group of heavenly beings stepped over a line, swore an oath on a snowy peak, and handed humanity a bag of glittering knives shaped like knowledge, swords and mascara, charms and star charts, root cutting and weaponsmithing, a crash course in power without wisdom. The result, according to the Book of Enoch, sent ripples through the sky and forced a flood that reset the clock of civilization. Something older than empires sits beneath Genesis 6. The vague line about the sons of God taking daughters of men and the Nephilim roaming the earth explodes into detail in Enoch. No soft edges, no polite euphemisms. A roster of 200 celestial beings led by Shemi-Hazza made a pact. They wanted wives. They wanted offspring. They wanted to live with the fire of earth in their veins. The place of their oath already tells a story. Mount Hermon, high country on the Lebanon-Syria border, snow-capped, storm-wreathed, sacred in layers upon layers of ancient memory. Enoch says, they named the mountain Hermon because they swore and bound themselves with a curse there, turning a holy watchpost into a memorial of rebellion. This is not fan fiction from a fringe corner. Archaeologists have pulled fragments of one Enoch from caves near the Dead Sea at Qumran. Aramaic copies, older than the Roman Empire, lay there for 2,000 years. Ethiopian Christians never lost the whole book, preserving it in Ge'ez, while the rest of the world forgot. The New Testament book of Jude quotes Enoch's opening prophecy word for word, and calls Enoch the seventh from Adam. The early bishops and apologists read it with respect. Then the canon narrowed, and the watchers were moved to the margins. The story did not change. It simply went quiet. Enoch names names, and it reads like a roll call of catastrophe. Shemi-Hazza, Azazel, Armaros, Barakijal, Kokabel, Ezekiel, Arakiel, Shemsiel, Sariel, and more. 200 in all. They came down in the days of Jared, ancestor of Noah. They bound themselves with mutual oaths to erase any chance of backing out. Then another detail blows the door wider. They did not come empty-handed. They came with knowledge. They came with arts. They came with weaponry and secrets that changed how humans saw their faces and how they waged their wars. Across the hills and plains, villages started to gleam with polished metal and faces lined with coal. The cries of newborns mingled with the hiss of quenched steel. The wives they took bore children, and those children did not fit the framework of ordinary life. Enoch says, their bodies grew vast, and their appetites grew sickening. Fields emptied, birds vanished. The strong houses of cities cracked under the weight of violence. The earth groaned. Heaven heard. Azazel stands out. Enoch points a finger at him with words that burn. He taught humanity how to make swords, knives, shields, breastplates. He revealed the metals of the earth and how to work them. He showed bracelets and ornaments and the use of antimony to darken eyelids, turning a glance into a trap and a face into a battlefield. He introduced stones and dyes, unlocking the vanity of splendor. A few lines later, Enoch indicts the result. Wickedness multiplied. Blood flowed. Seduction and warfare walked hand in hand like twin spears. Shemi-Hazza filled the air with incantations and root-cutting, and Armaros taught the undoing of spells. Barakijal handed down astrology. Kokabel mapped constellations. Ezekiel delivered lore of the clouds. Arakiel the signs of the earth. Shamsiel the signs of the sun. Sariel the course of the moon. Not generic trivia. Enoch lists them as precise categories tied to specific angelic names. The effect is surgical. It strips away the vagueness and pushes the viewer to face a central claim. Knowledge saturated with the wrong spirit deforms rather than heals. Calendars become manipulation. Weather reading becomes control. Beauty becomes domination. And steel never forgets what it was made for. The children of this union, the Nephilim, blossomed into a crisis. Enoch describes giants who devoured the nursed food of humanity, then turned on the herds, then, as hunger gnawed deeper, began to consume flesh. Eventually they drank blood. They ravaged creation and bent the animals into violence. The verbs stack like hammer blows. Devour, destroy, sin, accuse. The giants turned the world into a city with broken doors and no law. The earth could not bear the weight of their appetite. 4 archangels look down on this, and the narrative shifts. Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, Uriel, guardians of the world order. They lift their eyes to the throne and describe both the corruption and the cry. Enoch places words in their service. The whole earth has been filled with blood and unrighteousness, and the souls of the dead cry out. A legal brief ascends, written in grief and glowing like a brand. The answer comes as a chain of instructions. Raphael is commanded to bind Azazel hand and foot and cast him into the darkness, into pits cut in the desert, into a place called Dudael, with sharp and jagged stones, covering him with darkness until judgment. A vivid Hebrew echo rings out generations later in Leviticus, when a goat on the Day of Atonement is sent to Azazel in the wilderness. Enoch gives the cosmic backstory. Azazel, the teacher of weapons and vanity, is buried alive under a mountain of blistering sand and basalt to await a verdict. Gabriel is ordered to set the bastards against one another, to provoke the violent offspring of the Watchers into mutual destruction, thinning the armies of ruin that were devouring the world. Michael is told to bind Shemihaza and his companions in the valleys of the earth until 70 generations pass, a number that collapses human centuries into a single breath from the perspective of heaven. Uriel, the watcher over the world and the luminaries, is sent to warn Noah so that a remnant remains. The flood is framed in Enoch not as an angry whim, but as a legal purge designed to halt the spread of a hybrid chaos. The forbidden teaching did not fade with the waterline. The story digs deeper into the metaphysics of corruption. Enoch 15 delivers a verdict that still shapes demonology. The spirits proceeding from the bodies of the giants become evil spirits on earth. Their origin is a paradox. Born from human mothers and angelic fathers, their disembodied spirits are not of heaven and not of earth. They remain after the flood, rootless and ravenous, haunting, oppressing, attacking, stirring up sin, whispering ruin. They need no bread. They thirst without water. They wage their wars in mines and in cities. Enoch says they will remain until the great judgment. That one line cuts through centuries of speculation and anchors a world view in which the world can be both cleansed by water and still infested by predatory spirits. Enoch is not just a storyteller. He is a scribe. He stands between fallen watchers and the throne and presents petitions. The watchers, chained in underground caverns and mountains, beg him to write a plea for mercy. He does it. He writes. He delivers the petition to the house of God, and he receives a dream, a vision, that reads like lightning. The verdict returns. The petition is rejected. The watchers had been appointed to intercede for humans, not to beg humans to intercede for them. They abandoned their proper dwelling. They defiled, and now they are isolated in darkness until the end. Enoch reads the decision to them. He writes their names. Their faces fall. The silence in those caves would have felt like ice. The Book of the Watchers then narrows the focus onto Enoch's cosmic tour in the company of Uriel. The righteous man, seventh from Adam, is lifted through chambers of fire and crystal, past pillars that flash like lightning, to see the storehouses of the winds, the foundations of the earth, the gates where the sun rises, and the boundaries set for the moon. He records a 364-day year with solstices and equinoxes marked in precise lines. He numbers the gates. He explains the paths. He says there is order. He says there is balance. He says wisdom runs the cosmos like a hidden engine humming under everything. This is not the astrology of Kokabel. This is not the talismanic superstition of Barakijal. This is architecture. And by placing it right next to the Watcher's misteaching, the text makes a point with quiet precision. There is a difference between cosmic law and cosmic manipulation. One aligns with the Creator. The other fights the structure until the structure breaks back. Reading the book of Enoch with a Bible in hand turns threads into a rope. Genesis 6 sketches the outline. Enoch colors it in. Then the New Testament knots the strands. Jude 14:15 cites Enoch 1:9 without apology and says, "Behold, the Lord came with 10,000s of his holy ones to execute judgment." The epistle unfolds an early church memory, where Enoch's warnings were not suspect, but standard. Peter adds another layer. In 2 Peter 2, the 4 he writes of angels who sinned and were cast into gloomy chains of darkness, waiting for judgment. And in the same breath he mentions Noah and the flood. He sees one narrative. He slots the Watchers into a timeline of justice. 1 Peter 3 nods toward spirits in prison in the days of Noah, and a proclamation that rang out like a trumpet to a people underwater. Daniel 4 uses the very title that Enoch elevates, the decree of the Watchers. Holy ones, watchers, pronouncing judgment on arrogant kings. In Daniel, the Watchers are loyal. In Enoch, a company abandoned their posts. The word remains the same: guardians, observers, enforcers. The meaning shifts with context, like a river shifting banks, but still flowing from the same source. On the Day of Atonement, described in Leviticus, a goat was sent into the wilderness to Azazel. Priests confessed the sins of the people over it. Then it wandered into a place of desolation, symbolically carrying away guilt. In Enoch, Azazel is more than a word for desolate wilderness. He is a personality bound in a desolate waste. The scapegoat ceremony becomes a ritual that points to a deeper drama the community remembered, even if the scroll was not in their official canon. A broken world sometimes moves under the weight of an unwritten story. Early Christians read Enoch openly. Athenagoras in the 2nd century described angels who fell through lust for women and taught the use of roots and herbs. Tertullian defended Enoch's authority when some hesitated, pointing to the fact that Noah's family preserved the memory. Justin Martyr spoke of angels and their rebellious progeny. The Qumran community copied the Book of the Watchers into Aramaic, and in their caves lay the Book of Giants, a supplement that zooms into dreams and portents felt by the offspring of the Watchers. Centuries later, Augustine resisted the angelic interpretation of Genesis 6 and promoted the idea of the sons of God as the line of Seth. The debate shifted the mainstream. The text in Jude remained. The echoes in Peter remained. The footnotes piled up like stones in a river, marking a crossing that never moved. Mount Hermon itself carries the story in its snow and stones. Ancient altars dot its ridges. Bronze Age offerings and Roman shrines whisper that humans felt something heavy there for millennia. At the base of Hermon sits Caesarea Philippi, known earlier as Paneas or Banias, a place of caves and springs where ancient worship of Pan soaked into the limestone. In the Gospels, Jesus brings his disciples to this region, points to a rock, and speaks about the gates of Hades and the foundation of a new community. A few days later, on a high mountain nearby, he is transfigured. His robe becomes white. His face shines. Moses and Elijah appear. A voice from the cloud declares him beloved. Many scholars locate that high mountain on Hermon, not on the lower Mount Tabor. The irony glows like coals. On the very mountain where Watchers swore themselves to rebellion and taught vain arts, a greater Watcher unveils glory and reclaims the ground with light. Nothing in the text names Hermon explicitly for the Transfiguration, but the geography lines up and the symbolism stands on its own even if one chooses another peak. Bad oaths, carved into snow. Good glory poured onto rock. The Watcher's story refuses to stay pinned down in ancient geography. It intrudes into the daily lives of people who wear eyeliner and carry smartphones. It connects vanity to warfare. It slices through the muscle of a culture that reveres expertise with no guardrails. Enoch does not say iron is intrinsically evil, or that knowing the weather is forbidden. It says knowledge out of order corrupts. It says timing and teacher matter. It says wisdom in alignment with the Creator holds the cosmos together, while secrets stolen by oathbreakers tear the seams. The flood, in this telling, becomes not a myth about a temperamental deity, but a decision by a judge who saw the ledger fill with blood from a chain reaction set off by those who watched and then descended. The threads continue into a book that many never opened, the Book of Giants. Parts of it survived in Aramaic among the Dead Sea Scrolls, echoing further east in a Manichaean translation centuries later. It pulls listeners into the personal dread of the hybrid beings born from the Watchers, giant rulers with names like Mahue, Ohaya, and Hahaya dream nightmares that curdle the night. One dream shows a tablet submerged in water. When the tablet rises, only 3 names remain. Another dream shows a giant tree uprooted except for a stump. The interpretation runs like a chill. A flood is coming. Most names will be wiped. A remnant will survive. But the world as they know it dissolves. In the fragments, a giant sends Mahwe to seek Enoch for interpretation. The fallen father and the terrified sons reach out to the one man who can read the writing on the water and the tree. He sends back a message of judgment. The epilogue is deluge and silence. The text never lets the Watchers off the hook by blaming their children. It pins the blame to their oath, their teaching, their abandonment. The offspring are tragic and monstrous, but the origin lies with those who should have protected the line between worlds. Enoch 10 includes a command that all sin attributed to Azazel be written against him alone, a detail that kicks against any temptation to treat evil as an abstract fog. Names matter. Accountability matters. The desert called Dudayal becomes a waiting room for the one who taught daggers and black powder for the eyes. Details that might seem obscure throw sparks when they touch later pages. Enoch's 364-day calendar contrasts the calendars used in Rome and Babylonia. The Qumran community favored it and organized their festivals accordingly. Time becomes theology in Enoch. Order is sacred. In a world awash in superstition and control, the astronomical book presents a map to humility. The sun and moon do their work without the manipulation of incantations. They obey the word of the Lord of Spirits and follow precise paths. The right use of stars anchors people to seasons. The wrong use turns them into puppeteers who think they can tug fate by drawing a sigil under a certain moon. Enoch sorts the two with careful hands. The text even steps into the meat of anthropology with terrifying clarity. The origin of demons is not a faceless abyss. Enoch 15 says, "They are the disembodied spirits of giants, born of a union that violated categories." The Book of Jubilees echoes the story and adds that a portion of these spirits remained at the request of the Prince Mastema to test and accuse, overseen under limits. A pattern emerges. A rogue hand reaches out. The judge sets boundaries. Evil is neither sovereign nor eradicated. It is tolerated under chain, with an end date written in the calendar of heaven. Early commentators saw the threads. Tertullian linked the Watchers to the veils women wore in worship, treating cosmetics taught by Azazel as a sign of an ancient seduction. Athenagoras argued for the existence of demonic powers tied to the fall of angels. Origen read the angelic reading of Genesis 6 and noted the layers of interpretation in his day. As the Western Church moved toward Augustine, the readings shifted, but the memory kept opening the door whenever Jude or Peter was read aloud. The Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church never closed the door. First Enoch remains scripture. not a curiosity. Their liturgy flowed around the watchers as around the Psalms. The terror in Enoch is not that angels exist. It is that guardians can betray. The hope in Enoch is not that knowledge disappears. It is that wisdom outruns treason. Enoch moves like a messenger between caves of chains and courts of fire, reminding both worlds of a promise lodged before mountains rose. The flood becomes a sad hymn with a firm chorus. The earth will not remain a slaughterhouse forever. Bound watchers tremble as time counts down in the dark. Geography and theology press hands in the story. Mount Hermon rises as an emblem of defiance and reclamation. The plains of Shinar will later host a tower with bricks and tar, another technological marvel, reaching for a heaven that refuses to be kidnapped. The deserts around Judicale hold a bound rebel as Israel learns, through Leviticus, that sin can be carried away into the waste until judgment falls on the principalities themselves. The oceans remember the ark, and the salt taste of violence washed away. Every border in Enoch throbs with memory. Sky and earth, angels and humans, technology and holiness. The border breaks at one point and bleeds. The border heals with a verdict and a flood. Modern memory transforms the story into metaphor without losing its teeth. The forbidden knowledge in Enoch looks like an early warning about the danger of innovation without covenant. Metallurgy becomes missiles. Cosmetics become the weaponization of beauty on 1,000 screens. Astrology becomes predictive analytics that treat human souls as numbers. Root cutting becomes biotech that plucks genes like strings on a lyre. The lesson is not to burn books or ban computers. The lesson is to insist on order from above before reaching into the deep. Enoch holds up a mirror shaped like snow on a mountain and dares us to look. The line is always there. The gate is always guarded. The oath at the wrong gate always ends in chains. Another strand may be invisible at first glance, but it binds the story tighter. The New Testament idea of spiritual powers and authorities, rulers in heavenly places, resonates with Enoch's picture of watchers. The Apostle Paul writes of rulers and authorities being disarmed at the cross. The cosmic drama reaches past Judicial into a moment when judgment and mercy intersect in a body and on a hill. The transfiguration on a mountain near Hermon prefigured a descent into darkness at Golgotha, and a brighter unveiling 3 mornings later. The watchers had compromised the border for lust. The Christ opened it for reconciliation. The story shifts from broken oaths to a faithful one, from counterfeit glory to the real thing. The list of names in Enoch matters because it stops the idea from drifting into fable. Shemi-Hazah, Azazel, Armaros, Barak-Ijal, Kokabel. Art, weather, war, seduction, spells. Each domain of knowledge can be ordered by God or twisted by rebels. Enoch unfolds the twist and the consequence. It reveals the architecture of heaven so that humans can recognize the counterfeit. It pins the flood to the ledger of sin. It traces the origin of spirits that harm and explains their limit. It calls out the vanity of makeup used as a snare without hating beauty. It traces the line between a sword used to defend and a sword used to dominate. It turns stars into servants rather than masters. A few missteps in reading Enoch need a steady hand. Some translations give fantastical heights for giants. The ancient numbers often function symbolically, signaling enormity and terror rather than inviting a tape measure. The core truth remains the same. Their bodies were larger and their appetites were ruinous. Another misstep confuses knowledge itself with evil, as if iron and medicine were incorrigible. Enoch spends chapters describing the cosmos with scientific calm. Wisdom and order are the friend. The theft and misuse are the crime. The faithful watchers in Daniel remind every reader that not all watchers fell. Holy watchers remain as sentinels of justice and messengers of decrees. Language shifts between books, but the river is one. Every culture tells an origin story for catastrophe. In Enoch, catastrophe wears a face and swears an oath. The memory runs like a scar through the ancient Near East, with echoes in legends of beings who descended and taught arts, sometimes healing, sometimes violent. The Bible's witnesses shape those echoes into theology. God is one. His creation is orderly. His angels serve. Some fell. The fall left fingerprints on technology and power. The fall provoked judgment for the sake of rescuing the innocent and preserving the promise of a world healed. The closing chapters of 1 Enoch circle back to a courtroom. The judge sits. The books open. The wicked are purged from the earth. The righteous inherit light. Azazel and the rebel watchers face their end. The spirits that harassed and drank violence slink into their final silence. The sun and moon keep their appointed paths. The tree of life stands in a fragrant place, and the righteous draw near to it. The narrative runs out of words, the way a thunderstorm runs out of thunder. The air feels different. The earth exhales. The watchers who remained faithful keep watch. The Book of Enoch does not stand alone in the ancient library. It sings in harmony with fragments and parallels. The Book of Giants gives you the raw fear of doomed hybrids. Jubilees replays the watchers with calendar details and covenant rhythms. Daniel speaks of watchers who decree and learn that heaven rules over proud kings. Jude and Peter lower the rope into the pit and pull Enoch's testimony into apostolic light. Leviticus whispers Dudael without naming it. Revelation echoes Enoch's final courtroom, with images turned up to 12. The timeline closes with a city that needs no sun, because its light does not fail. No spell touches it. No vanity lasts in it. No sword goes unsheathed in it. The watchers who stayed true still walk its walls, standing in our own century with screens humming and factories breathing and algorithms guessing what we will eat next. The story sharpens rather than blurs. The human race sits with Azazel's toolbox and Enoch's calendar in the same hands. The line between craft and corruption runs through every lab, every studio, every parliament. Enoch, spoken in the first millennium BC and copied in caves for 2,000 years, meets the fluorescent light and refuses to blink. It names lust for power as the old magic. It names fame without goodness as the old spell. It names weapons treated like gods as the old sin. It holds up a mirror and invites recognition, not despair. Scholars like George Nicholsberg and James Vanderkamp have followed the trail from Qumran fragments like 4Q201 to the Ethiopic text and traced how the Book of the Watchers grew in the 3rd and 2nd centuries BCE. Robert Henry Charles translated it for the English-speaking world a century ago, and the footnotes have turned into streams of commentary. Archaeological reports locate altars on Hermon, and historians of religion link Banias with ancient rites that make the gospel scenes crackle with layered meaning. Nothing here asks for blind belief. It asks for attention and for respect for voices older than empires. The narratives match. The motifs click into place across testaments. The story has weight. In the end, the Watchers serve a paradoxical purpose. They embody rebellion so that justice can be seen as protection rather than mere prohibition. They show what happens when the world's guardians trade their post for pleasure. They underline the mercy that restrains until a final day. They give the flood a face and the demons a pedigree, so that both can be placed within the larger arc of creation healed. The Book of Enoch sits outside many canons and inside one. It sits beside the apostles as a respected elder. Its images walk across the pages of the New Testament with the quiet confidence of a witness who has already testified, and rests while the verdict unfolds. The mountain where they swore shines in the distance, snow like a crown no rebel can wear. The desert where Azazel is bound still burns at noon. The caves where the Watchers wept their petition still echo. When the wind hits the right angle, the sky keeps to its gate. The sun keeps to its circuit. Enoch's ink dries and then glows again in candlelight 2 millennia later. The warning remains. Knowledge torn from wisdom remains a knife. Wisdom married to knowledge remains a lamp. The line remains bright and thin as moonlight on ice.